Alrighty, folks, as promised on the daily financial news, we have the one and only Simon, the uneducated economist. We're going to follow up, talk about the Vegas event, which he was a keynote speaker at. We're going to get caught up on credible threats. We're going to talk about what he sees going on in the economy. And as always, this is open to our school community, so you may see some questions or comments from other folks. But Simon, how you been, man? What's going on?
Oh, I'm doing amazing. Thank you for asking. Just plugging away, doing the same old thing, working my day job and just trying to break down economic theories and monetary policy as best I can and just, and trying to enjoy life as best I can do it.
Yeah, so let's kind of things that you shared with us at that Vegas event was credible threats.
Yeah.
It really was eye-opening. It's been a few months. We've had a lot of stuff go on since that event in February. So when we think credible threats, where's your mind at today?
Um, right now, I think probably the most apparent credible threat that I believe is going to be taking place right now is one that hasn't really gotten the attention that I thought it would have by now, and that is the Treasury buying back its own bonds. Have you heard of this?
A little bit, yep.
Yeah. So this is, to me, this is at least what I feel is going to be taking place here in the future is going to be a lot of attention to this particular event of the
Okay.
Treasury buying back its own bonds. When that information gets out there, I believe that the market participants, the people who would typically be investing into bonds, will find the backing of the Treasury buying back its own bonds as the confidence, the reassurance to be the willing participant within the market, providing the liquidity for those bonds. Now, that to me is probably.
Oops. Sorry, Simon, you have to unmute yourself. My bad. There you go.
Was I muted the whole time?
No, no, you were good for most of that. So just run through that one more time. That was my technology error. So sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So right now, I think the most present credible threat taking place is going to be within the Treasury market itself. Now, the Treasury has made an announcement that they are going to be buying back their own bonds. And
Right.
now the idea of them buying back their own bonds is to make sure that the bond market stays liquid. Now, it's not a lot of attention that has been brought to this particular event, but I believe that once the attention has been brought to this event and that it is like a common narrative within the mainstream media out there,
Mhm.
that just that talking, that conversation, or the idea of the Treasury buying back its own bonds will bring the confidence and the reassurance to the willing participants to be part of that market, and then bring the liquidity back into it. So the Treasury probably won't even have to even participate within the market itself. But the idea of them being there will bring in the willing participants. And I think right there is going to be the most common credible threat that we are going to be facing here in the next,
So so
few
let
months.
so 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 let me break this down for the average person because you actually spoke about this. I watch your videos all the time. You talked about this probably, man, this might have been 9 or 12 months ago, where you talked about the Treasury threatening to do something. The market participants came in, the Treasury did nothing or did, very little just to. I remember this conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I play out what you just said and translate it to interest rates, I think what you're saying is all this talk track about other parties losing confidence in the Treasury, needing higher rates, is actually the actual result will be completely opposite. The Treasury says we're going to be willing buyers. That gives faith and confidence to other parties. And then, oh, by the way, because now there's other parties, rates come down. And if you happen to be in the housing industry, mortgage rates come down. Oh, by the way, the spread comes down. And that could be the exact opposite of what most people are talking about. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And you'll find that just the threatening of being within the market, the Treasury coming in and buying those bonds, they will buy some. In fact, they've already started doing some of the program already. And that is the establishment of the credible threat. Like once people see that they are going to do it, they're willing to do it. Like they have the tools, the capabilities, and the threat of it going on.
Yeah.
That's all they need. And then they start pouring in and taking care of business for the Treasury itself. And they don't have to do anything at all. Right.
I mean, it's wild because right now the fear-based doomer, mainstream media is talking about, all these other countries not buying the treasuries. What you're basically saying is, hey, the US government or the treasury is going to, Fed's going to show faith that will pull people in. And then everybody's going to be shocked. Why are rates going down? Why are rates going down? Well, the credible threat. Um, that's going to be, and that'll happen relatively quickly, right? Meaning months or quarters, not years.
Well, the threat of it, I mean, the idea of the actual bond buyback program was meant to start here, I believe, in June. Like, I don't think they actually came up with an actual date of starting it. They just said sometime in the middle of the year. But if you think about like what the Treasury has announced as far as their bond buyback program, and then also in conjunction with the Federal Reserve announcing the easing off on quantitative tightening. So,
Mhm.
like, the Federal Reserve is allowing a bunch of treasuries to roll off the balance sheet every month. Right.
Right.
So what they're going to do is they are going to reduce the amount that actually rolls off the balance sheet, which
Yep.
will again add relief to the bond market as far as the liquidity issues. And this is timed out almost
Hmm.
like in parallel with each other.
Right.
So to me, it's just like, well, this is like obviously planned for like well over a year now. Like this isn't a
Yeah,
surprise.
you're
This
right.
isn't something that they like, hey, we're looking at market conditions and thinking, oh man, we have to do this for no, this is something that they had like I mean shit. I mean, I did videos on it over a year ago.
Yeah,
So
I know. I
it's like
remember.
I mean it's not a surprise. This isn't like something that there is like a new event that they're trying to figure out. That's not what's going on.
Wow. Wow. You've been right so long. For
Thanks,
for
man.
so many things. It's wild. It's wild to watch. It's the economy is a chessboard. Some people know how to play it, some people don't. And you've been doing daily videos, kind of going back to that. So it's really fun to watch. So the other thing, Simon, you have a day job, right? What's going on with the day job? I hear more and more people are kind of pulling back on big projects. I'm curious what you're hearing in your day job.
So, for those of you who don't know, I do work at a lumber yard. I do retail sales for a living. It is a very small, privately owned mom and pop type of lumber yard out in the middle of nowhere of Oregon, right? I live out in the Pacific Northwest, over on the coast of Oregon. And the things that are happening within the lumberyard itself, I think are very like telling of what is going on throughout the rest of the nation out there. And what's very interesting is that I do see building taking place, but not extensively, right?
Mhm.
And so this is like I find this very odd to really think about because really when I think about houses as expensive as they are,
Mhm.
like I set aside like all the politics, all the crap and everything, and I just think, okay, so there's a product here that's expensive, right? I mean, it's just an expensive product. Now, to me, like those who build that particular product or put that particular product together would want to take advantage of those high prices, right? So you would think that that would bring in the community of people who would build and add to inventory, but that's not what's taking place right now because there's a particular narrative out there that says, man, if I build this house today, there could be a very good chance that by the time it's completed, I won't be able to sell it for the price that I am projecting for today. So this makes me very nervous to start a house, right? To start these
Mhm.
projects. So even though it's an environment in which that you would think that there would be a lot of activity coming in to try and take advantage of the high prices, the actual feelings and narratives that the builders have is that man, the buyers are not going to be there because of the high interest rates and the traffic is low, and
Mhm.
so therefore I don't really want to start this house. This produces a huge gap in inventory, right? For or at least new starts when it comes to housing. So you think about it, is the longer this gap goes on in new starts, right? For production gap, it's going to take that much more increase in production to make up for all that time spent without production taking place. So you not only have to ramp up production twice as much as you were doing before just to make up for the missing time,
Yeah.
and then you got to keep pace with the demand. It's just like housing to me, and from the perspective that I have from being at the lumber yard itself and being in the retail industry of it, is in my opinion is that there is not nearly enough activity taking place in the new home starts like as there could be in order to keep up with the demand and the inventory shortage that we are experiencing
Yeah.
now. On just the kind of like the other side of things, what we were experiencing a couple of years ago with shortages of materials and time lags and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff is starting to ease up. We're finding that
Hmm.
material is coming in a lot quicker. Those like time constraint or those time lags that would constrain a project's profitability because of those lags, or those things are starting to ease. So we're finding where, like, the conditions in which to build are becoming more acceptable, but they're not great. So, you know, how long this goes on for, I mean, is, I guess, is anybody's, is
I
anybody's
I
guess, but
I
this is
got a
what I'm
quick
seeing.
question, because one of the things that I proposed, and I have receipts, right? I was talking with Lance Lambert, who at the time was at Fortune, now he's at Resi Club. Um, back when Silicon Valley Bank popped. So what's that, like 15 months ago? I
Uh,
was like, dude, this is going to be bad. And what I mean by that is I thought the mom and pop, the builders who do, 1 to, 20 homes a year, 10 homes a year, small track, small infill. I'm like, they're going to be out of the market, right? Cost of that debt is like 10, 11%. It's variable. The LTVs, it's hard. The whole commercial bank's going to say no. But the flip side is the big boys who have debt and equity and stocks, they're just going to go ham. So I think we're really seeing the classic, the big getting bigger and the small, frankly, disappearing. Do you think maybe
well,
that's what's happening at the lumberyard? It's just the small guys are getting pushed out?
yeah, I can see where that could really be taking place. And it's hard for me to see that kind of aspect of things because of my remote location. I don't have as many of the big time builders in my area. So I don't really have, like, I don't see that competition between like
Mm,
the small mom and pop guys and the bigger, like, corporations that come in and build, thousands of homes in an area or something like that. Like, I don't experience those kind of builders in my area.
okay.
So it's hard for me to, like, relate some of the things that I am viewing to that kind of aspects. But,
Okay.
as far as just like the individual builders, like there was a time where the store would be very busy with not only builders that I had never recognized before. Like, I mean, these are
Mm,
new guys to the area who, like, are taking advantage of, like, the high demand for builders that are needed in this area. That has dissipated quite a bit. Like, I don't see that
mm,
as much. And then a big one that I also see is the phone calls that come in. Like, people call me up at the lumberyard looking for carpenters, saying, "Hey, I need somebody to work on my house." That has also dropped quite a bit.
yeah.
So these are telling signs of what is going on out there in the future. And so if I don't have somebody calling me up saying, "How much is a door? How much is a window? What is a carpenter's name? What is his number?" If I don't have that going on, that tells me in the future is not going to be very active, And so, when
Yeah.
those calls start picking up and all of a sudden I'm getting a lot of bids and I'm writing a lot of, estimates out there, well, then I know that things are going to start ramping up here in a few months and I'm just not experiencing that. So,
Yeah, so I think that really goes with some of the articles I'm reading is that home buyers are really pulling back on big purchases. What does that mean? They're not doing the remodel, they're not doing the additions. Now, the interesting thing about that is it could either be they're not choosing to do them or they've already done them. Like once you've already done the addition, you don't do it again, at least most of the
yeah,
time. So I mean, any thoughts on that? Is versus
yeah.
delayed demand versus maybe demand got pulled forward with crazy low rates?
Yeah. Well, and I believe that all happened during the pandemic when there was a lot of economic activity happening within the building industry. I mean, not only in sales of building supplies, but just, the amount of people out there who were doing the remodels and building new construction and doing all the stuff that was happening. So when people get a stimulus check and then they're locked down at home, they have a tendency to kind of work on their house,
Yes.
and so like past projects and future projects got pulled into that time frame, and it created a huge demand in one little tiny, section of the industry during a time in which that would typically not be experienced, right? This pandemic and the stimulus check. So all of a sudden, all these projects got pulled into that one little area and just created a huge demand and price increases and everything else. Well, that takes a while to work through, right?
Correct.
You don't need to replace the deck again. The fence is built. The rot repair was done. The house has been painted. All the stuff has like been done. So now you got to wait, 5, 6, 10 years before those maintenance things need to be done again, or those type of projects start to pick up again.
Yeah.
Until then, you just kind of have to deal with the new ideas that are showing up as opposed to the repairing of the old one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently you are going to be a speaker at an upcoming event, Rebel Capitalist in Orlando. Is that right?
Yeah, I can't believe it. I got a well, I haven't confirmed it yet, but yeah, I got a message from George Gammon asking me if I wanted to speak at the Rebel Capitalist. So I don't know if he needed a speaker to fill in or if somebody can
Oh,
make
come
it or
on now.
something. But yeah, I got an opportunity. So here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be up on stage over at the Rebel Capitalist in Orlando. So I'm really looking forward to it, man. I can't believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out George Gammon for bringing on the uneducated economist, putting him on stage. You deserve
Yeah.
to be on lots of more stages. So
Well,
congratulations.
thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak at your event as well. It was great. It was one of the funner events that I think I've been to. As far as just
Yeah.
the energy and the communications and the activity that was happening there. It was a really good time.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's talk about the economy. You and I both
Yeah.
look at the economy. There's lots of moving parts. People have been calling for a recession for years now. I don't know if you're seeing it either in your day job or in the numbers that you look at, but where would you kind of peg the U.S. economy as we're sitting here in the middle of May of 24?
I think we're in recession. I mean, I think we've been in recession for some time. And I think the problem that most people are facing when it comes to seeing this recessionary event that has taken place right now is that it was already bailed out. It was
Oh,
a pre it was a
yeah.
pre-bailout that took place during the pandemic. And so like typical like there's like you said, there are so many things to look at. I mean, you can just look at it from political, social, environmental, it just goes on and on. What is the worst part of a recession? Right? What is the worst part for most people is that they lose their job and the corporations get bailed out. Right? Like if you were to name two things, that would be it. Right? Everybody loses their job and the corporations get bailed out and it pisses everybody off. So during the pandemic, we had a situation in which, again, with the credible threats, if you follow the credible threat theory, we had a situation in which that the corporations had a chance to gorge on incredibly cheap debt.
Yes.
Right? I mean, here interest rates were at rock bottom prices. The treasuries were damn near negative, right? And if you think about it on a purchasing power basis, they were going negative.
Yeah, by
So
a lot.
everybody, right? So everybody who is a fixed income investor really had no place to go to except for into the corporations where they were taking on a lot of risk. Now, the corporations loved this situation because during that time they were just sitting there just loading up, just gorging on this incredibly cheap debt. Well, when that happens, people have a tendency to need to spend that money. When I mean people, I mean the corporations, right? And so what do? They start, buying equipment, building things, hiring people, right? So they hired a ton of people. And you see a lot of people moved from like the service industry up into the corporations, right? And then everybody was wondering where the hell all the service industry, workers went,
Yeah.
right? Well, they're
Yeah.
all working up as zombie corporations. So now we have two things that are happening here. We have unemployment that now goes incredibly low, right? And we have all these corporations sitting on a ton of cash, right? And this is during the pandemic. So now what do we find happening? Right? We find a situation in which that the problems that we would typically see during a recession, the layoffs, the bankruptcies and all this other stuff is not creating the unemployment rise like we would typically see during a recession. Why? Because everybody's losing their job at the zombie corporations and they have to take a job over at the service industry flipping burgers,
Mm.
right? Now, it sucks. That sucks, right? Nobody wants to lose $100,000 a year job to go work, a $35,000 a year job or something like that. But guess what? It is a job, right? And so
Mhm.
that's the reason why the unemployment isn't rising is because they're going from these zombie corporations, or when these people end up getting laid off, they're going into the service industry, which means that they have a job and the unemployment doesn't rise. So now this
Interesting.
is left over from the pandemic, right? So this is how the pre-bailout took place. And now we're sitting in a situation in which that the corporations who were viable have enough cash to now make it through this idea of high interest rates and all the problems that we would typically see where bankruptcies would be the problem. They're already got the cash, they're already bailed
Mm.
out. And really, if you think about it, it was the markets that did it during the pandemic with the use of the special purpose vehicle and the credible threat theory again, that had said the Federal Reserve said we are going to be buying corporate debt. The idea of that alone brought the market participants in saying, hey, we're going to front run the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve didn't even have to buy hardly any at all. Like they
Yeah.
just sat there and watched it take place, and all these corporations just loaded up on cash. So to me, we are kind of pretty much in the recession now, but it's already been bailed out, and there is no bailout coming. So
Mm,
you know, we just have to basically ride it out until eventually the unemployment rises, and then the Federal Reserve will reverse course on their interest rates.
yeah. Do you think there's a number that the Fed's looking at on the unemployment rate that's like problematic? Clearly 3.9, not a problem. 4, probably not a problem. But at some point, they're going to cry uncle and go, that's too much.
Yeah, well, there's something called the neutral unemployment rate.
Hmm.
And so I think that number is a lot lower than, and I don't think anybody knows exactly where that's at. Like, I don't know if you can really go and say the neutral unemployment rate or the neutral rate of employment is right here. I don't think there is an exact number that you can go to. So I think they just know that at some point that the unemployment rising will eventually become a very restrictive position for the economy, but they don't know exactly how far up that is.
Mm,
And considering the idea that when unemployment is really low, it creates an inflationary scenario. We have been in historically low unemployment numbers for so long now, and the Federal Reserve failed to achieve the inflationary numbers that they were looking for, even at historically low unemployment. I
mm,
have to think about that. It was just like, well, if low unemployment doesn't create the inflationary scenario that the Fed is looking for, the neutral employment rate must be pretty damn low, right?
mm.
So if unemployment rises, and I don't even think it would have to rise significantly, I think it would move above the neutral unemployment or the neutral employment rate. Am I making myself good? Am I
Yeah,
making
no,
sense?
I'm right on board. No, I got you.
Uh, so I think that if the unemployment began to rise, I don't think it would have to move very much to be significant enough above the neutral rate in order to be restrictive to the economy. But it's not moving. Like unemployment doesn't seem to rise very much.
Yeah, it's really funny when we talk about this. So I have an econ degree, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago. So whatever. Well, 20 years ago, the full employment rate I was taught was 6%,
Hmm.
right? I graduate, I go back in an MBA, it morphs to 5%. We've been below 4%, I think, for like 39 months or some crazy number like that. So you could be right. This number might be in the fours. And I've actually said on my channel, I think the magic number is 4.2. I think that there's this rule called the Psalm rule, where if you're 0.5% above the last trailing 6 months average, you're going to be in a recession. Today's calculation puts that right around 4.2. So I think you're right. I don't think it's going to take a gigantic move to catch the Fed's attention. I also, Simon, let me pose this. I think Jerome Powell pivoted in his last news conference. What do I mean by that? In his last news conference, he basically said, we are worried about stable prices and employment. For the last 18 months, it's been inflation, inflation, inflation. He had this one line. I forget, I wrote it down, but I don't have it in front of me. Something about the unemployment being weaker than expected or something like that. So I think Jerome Powell is now focused on unemployment and stable prices, which in my book is a flip because it's only been inflation for a year and a half. What do you think?
Um,
Feel free to disagree.
I I don't know if that's necessarily a pivot yet.
Okay.
Like I don't know if that's necessarily a pivot. To me, like, right now the Federal Reserve is sitting on their hands.
True.
And I think that they're talking and using their job owning, their words, their forward guidance, their signaling. I think that's more of their efforts in guiding the markets. In fact, we just did a review of Philip. What is the gentleman's name? I already forgot. Phillips, from the Federal Reserve, and he did a speech just like basically breaking down how the communications are more important than anything else that they have going on. So basically the communication about the interest rate adjustment is more important than the actual interest rate adjustment itself. And when especially Jerome Powell, because he is the spokesperson for the
Yep.
FOMC. So when he is speaking the mind of the monetary policy and on behalf of the entire FOMC. So when he is saying things, it is very deliberate and it is very cautious and very purposeful. And they knew they screwed up back at the end of the year. right? At the end of
Mhm.
last year, when they put out that dot plot map and they were talking about all these interest rates cuts, and it freaked everybody out,
It
thinking there was
did.
guaranteed 7 interest rates cuts going into the future. In fact, we talked about it. I'm like, I don't know where this
I
delusion
don't
is
know.
coming from.
I don't know where it's
I
coming
was
from.
just like, all right. I mean, you guys are nuts to think that they're going to actually be cutting that many times in the future and even
No.
considering it. But it was like, in so many people's minds, it was a guarantee. So the
Mm.
Fed knew that that was like whoops, like they even mentioned it in that speech. They were like, whoa, people like really overreacted to that one.
Yeah, they
So
overreacted. Yeah. Yeah.
and like, and so this is
Yeah.
really where, like, what is it that the Federal Reserve needs at the time that they are making those statements? Like, is there pressure within the markets that is now creating pain within the economy in which that they are hoping that they need relief? Like, or they needing relief within the markets? Or do they need a feeling of what it would be like to have an actual interest rate cut? Because the moment that they put out the forward guidance or the idea that there could be one, the markets start reacting as if it's already happened. So they can create a situation of interest rate cuts without actually having to do it if they put out the threat credibly, right?
Yep.
And now the
Correct.
problem with it is that they are knowing that the more they do this, the more uncertainty and the volatility starts to come in as people start to, like, go like, what the hell is the Fed doing now?
Mm.
The like, eventually the gaslighting itself will drive the individual crazy to the point they don't even believe them or themselves or anything else that's going on out there, right? And so that's the last thing that the Fed wants, is to lose that credibility, right? So
Hmm.
at some point, I feel that they will cut rates into the future and give good interest rate, like, analogies and data and everything else for the reasonings that they did it. But up until that point, all their monetary policy and everything is all about that forward guidance. It's all about the job owning that they're putting out there. So if everybody is convinced, or the majority of the people are convinced in a particular direction, that's it. That's the
Hmm.
monetary policy right there.
I totally agree with all of that. I don't know if you saw this. I'm going to assume you did, but Freddie Mac, Freddie Mac announced that they are looking at possibly creating seconds behind Freddie Mac first. Have you heard about this or no?
No, no, tell me about that.
So Freddie Mac, obviously one of the biggest lenders out there, is looking at creating second mortgages for people who have firsts at really low interest rates, because it doesn't make sense to do a cash out refi where you take your 2% mortgage up to 8% just to get, 40 grand. What would be a better opportunity for most people is simply to get a second mortgage. Freddie Mac has historically not done seconds. I want to repeat that. They have not done seconds. Why might they be doing this? One, they actually could be struggling for business, right? Home sales are down, purchases are down. They got to keep the lights on, possibly. Second, they are realizing the fact that there's a lot of people locked into their mortgage, locked in with massive equity, right? If you bought 3, 4, 5 years ago, shoot, 10 years ago and did a rate and term refi, you got tons of equity. So one of the things that I'm looking at this, and I think it was Meredith Whitney. Meredith Whitney said that there could be a trillion with a T in equity tapped. To me, that's another credible threat, money printer go burr. And that's not even, the Fed doing anything. That's just, people tapping their equity.
Okay,
What do
so
you,
give me an
yeah,
example of that. So, like, say I just got my house here a little over 2 years ago. I have $100,000 equity.
great. What's your mortgage rate today?
3.125.
Right. So for whatever reason, you want to go get 40K. One of the things you could do today is do what's called a cash out refi. That would unfortunately take your whatever it was, 3% mortgage up to 8% across the board. And they would hand you 40 grand. What if you have a Freddie Mac first? What you could do, leave the first alone. You go to Freddie Mac, you can get a 40K second. That 40K second will be at 8%. Your first is still at, I don't know, 3%. So you still get the money, and your monthly payments are significantly lower because you didn't do a cash out refi.
I see. So you're just taking, I get it. You're just taking out the second for the equity itself instead of doing a refi for the whole thing. Right.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so I can imagine this is like, If I was getting this right, and and forgive me because I don't study the housing market nearly as much as you do, but if I
It's
got
okay.
this right, the amount of homes that are underwater right now is like 2% of all
Yeah.
mortgages out there. And like prior to the pandemic, it was something like 18 or 19%. I could be wrong on those numbers, but
Yeah.
I mean, it was something far significantly higher than it is today.
Hmm.
And so it leads me to believe that there is a ton of equity sitting out there in all these homes if only 2% of them are actually sitting underwater, right?
Hmm.
And so that would make a lot of sense that if there is that much equity out there and there's not a lot of economic activity, and when these banks are really needing to produce a contract, right? That's
Correct.
really
That's
what
how
it
they
comes
make their
down
money.
to.
Exactly.
That's how they make their money. They don't like, it's just like it commission, right? I need to,
Yeah.
if it's a commission sale, I need to produce something. And if I can't get them to
Correct.
refinance the entire building, or the entire loan, then I'll just refinance a little section of it. At least there's
Correct.
still a product that is being produced that I can get a commission on. And so that makes a lot of sense that that would begin to take place, considering the vast amount of equity that most people probably have in their home and the demand from these bankers wanting to produce a debt that they can then get a commission on. So yeah, all that probably is going to be taking place. I mean, it seems logical,
No, and again, and
especially
this
over
is,
time.
yeah, and the numbers that I've seen, I think it was like 2.6% of homes are severely underwater, with most of them in kind of the like Mississippi, Louisiana area. We have 40% of homes with no debt. We have record. I think I saw $26 trillion in home equity. So even if we got 1 trillion, that's like 5%. It's like 5% of the equity. So yeah, I think there's a lot of equity in if the banks, if the banks want to lend, it's going to be products like this. It's going to be seconds,
Hmm.
right? Because nobody wants to get rid of a 3% first. It just doesn't make sense.
Right. And I mean, I just think about like just like any other thing out there. I mean, I got lumber for sale. Bankers have loans for sale. Right. I mean, how do they
Exactly.
like they got to come up with a product that somebody's going to buy. And like if nobody wants their product, then they're going to have to become creative at what it is that they can produce. And so yeah, I can imagine that they'd even go into making other things, that might, give them the ability to
Yeah.
create an instrument of debt that they could then get a commission or sell on.
Yeah. This is really interesting because we talked earlier. You thought we were in a recession. Um, again, with it, one of the things that I have postulated for about a year now is I think we're going to go through our first rolling recession of really the last 50 years. Now, if you study economics, you can look at and call 1989 a rolling recession. It's kind of one, but a rolling recession is going to be really interesting because we never get to negative GDP, right? We got some sectors slammed and some sectors growing, and then these sectors that are slammed come out with these ones shrinking. It's going to be really interesting. And again, I study housing and mortgage a lot. I don't think a lot of people caught this in the mortgage industry. For the longest time, the mortgage industry has been down double digits, 30%, 40%, 50% originations. Guys, last week, mortgage originations were up 16% year on year. Now, it's still a horrible number, right? It's an ugly number on a slightly less ugly number on a year ago that was ugly. But that means it's growing again, at least on a year over year basis. In housing, right? Housing bottomed at 3.79 million existing home sales. I think the last reading was 4.2. What's that? 12% increase? So it's really funny to watch the interest rate sensitive sectors who got hammered first. They're starting to heal themselves, right? It's been 18 months, it's been 24 months. So it's wild to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I kind of also look at it on like just all the way dating back to like Cantillon theory,
Mhm.
Cantillon's essay on economic theory, and how what happens when new money comes into the system and the regular pouring of new money into the system, what ends up happening to the inequality within those particular areas. And I mean, he straight up says it. There's no better obvious appearance of money or the abundance of money in the system other than rents and leases in the real estate industries, right? Or on properties is what he described it as. And it totally makes sense. Like, the longer that this fiat currency system continues to pour new money into it, we are going to find that this situation is going to continue. You know, this separation, this inequality growth, and the idea that housing is going to become harder to get is going to become more prevalent our society and within the economy. You know, I tell people this and they get very discouraged and upset and they think, well, you know, damn, I have no chance, I have no hope. But that's not the truth of it all. What I'm trying to say is that you can't do it the way that it used to be done. You have to
Hmm.
change the way that you're doing things now, and part of that is whether you figure out how to live on less money and earn more of it, and to come up with a way that you can get into that real estate, or you get creative when it comes to like house hacking or teaming up with other people or doing something of that nature. But just knowing that it's not going to be easy and that you're not going to be able to do it the way that it used to be done, and there's never going to be a situation that comes that's going to create that for you. So, you
Yeah.
know,
No,
it's
I'm
just sad to
glad.
say, but it's on its way. You know.
I'm glad we kind of speak the same truth, right? We want to wake people up. We want them to realize what's going on. That the amount of people that think a crash is coming is sad, right?
It's
It's
well,
just sad.
it's you know, and the problem that I think a lot of people think when it comes to the crash is that they're hopeful. They're hopeful that they're going to be in a position in which that they can get in a house too, and that's why they're hoping for the crash. And so they look for evidence of it so that they can confirm their bias on it. And that's really, you know, that's really what they're anticipating. And I have to think, you know, you have to realize unless you are ultimately prepared for that crash with a ton of money sitting there waiting, you know, for that prime opportunity to do it, most people who are waiting for the crash don't have the ability to get into a house anyway,
I agree.
right? And so to like think, okay, here's the crash. You go to the bank, I want to get a loan. Sorry, no, that's the reason why this housing market is crashing is because nobody's getting loans, right? You know,
Mhm.
and that would ultimately be it. So unless you're like already rich, in position, ready to buy into a crashing housing market, most people during that time wouldn't have the opportunity to get into a house anyway.
No, and I lived through it, right? I've been buying since 2002.
Mm-hmm.
2010, at least in my market, was the best year to buy homes, and there was nobody buying. They were scared. They were freaked out. And you're absolutely right. People, and again, a lot of people have been hearing from what I call the crash bros for 4 or 5 years, and they've just like they've just missed it, right? I feel really bad for the folks who had the capital to buy in 2020 or 21, and
Yep.
they didn't because of these crash bros. I mean, they're going to pay through the nose
Yeah.
at this point.
I mean, bro, I wasn't necessarily a crash bro, but I was definitely on the higher end of concern that the housing market was going to turn when I went to go buy my house, right? And it was taking everything out of me because I had the foreclosure in the past, so they made me put even more down payment than I was expecting, and
Right.
like literally left me with $300 in my checking account when I was done putting the down payment on this house. And I thought for sure, damn it, I am going to end up underwater on this house the same way I was before, and I'm going to go into foreclosure. And I was just telling myself all these crazy, like scary ass stories about what was going to happen, and none of that took place, and it was completely the opposite. Now I've got $100,000 equity in my home, and I'm thinking
Genius.
best thing that ever happened. It was like, I mean, it was like, holy crap, thank God that took place. Like, I mean, I just like,
And the
it
most
was,
important part of that is not the equity, but the fact that your housing cost is fixed.
yeah, yeah. Well, somewhat. My insurance went up dramatically, you know, damn insurance companies, but that's not the housing problem. That
Yeah.
wasn't the mortgage fault, you know. But yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And that's in, you know, it's an expensive mortgage, you know, but it's just like, you know, I think about the rent on a house like that would be, you know, far more than what I'm paying in a mortgage.
Exactly. That's
And
what I meant.
you
Exactly.
know, I'm in the community that I wanted to be in. Like I literally bought a house that was like 2 miles from where I grew up, from the house that I grew up in, you know. So I'm
Awesome.
like, I am exactly where I wanted to be, and it's worth it to me, you know, like I'm
That's
sitting at the
awesome.
school right now because I get good reception here, and this is the same school that my kids are going to that I went to. It's just like I
That's
mean, it was
awesome.
all worth it. It's like perfect, you know. It's like the universe was like it lined it up, even though I was scared as hell and didn't want to do it or anything. It was just like, no, man, this is what you were needing right here. You
There you
know?
go. So sometimes you got to step up and pull that trigger, and you're glad you did. It worked out. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
uh
it's face your fear, you know.
yeah, exactly. Face your fear and grow. One of the things that I try to tell people, I try to get them to understand, and I want to get your feedback on this. It's a very simple phrase. inflation is a feature, not a bug. How does that hit you?
Yeah. You know, I look at inflation a lot differently than a lot of people do. Like
Okay.
I look at inflation like, I mean, what is inflation? Is inflation like the price of something going up, or is inflation the expansion of money and credit? And then the prices are like the results of it. So like prices are the symptom of inflation, right? You know, like
Okay.
that's really what it comes down to. Because
I mean, I
if
don't
you
want.
have an increase, are we still here?
Yeah, you're go ahead. I'll mute
Okay.
whoever that is.
Yeah. And so, you know, if you think about like what is it that's creating the inflationary scenario that we are experiencing, right? It's the increase in prices that everybody is freaked out about, and then they immediately blame it on the money printer. They say, hey, when money printer go off, prices go up. And so I can really agree with that because really you can't have a price inflation without the expansion of money and credit. But then I also have to question, well, why did quantitative easing one, two, three, and four fail to produce the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for, right? I mean, there's
Mhm.
even speeches talking about how the problem that the Fed was facing was an inflation expectation that was persistently too low rather than too high. And this
Yeah.
was given November of 2018 by the New York Fed president, John Williams, right? And so,
Mhm.
like, I think about that, you know, it was just like, what in the world is going on that the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve is looking for can't be found even after the expansion of the balance sheet from $850 billion to $4.5 trillion? So, what is inflation then, right?
Mhm.
So, inflation in my mind, right, is when prices go up from the added consumption that has taken place. Right?
Mhm.
When you have a supply demand imbalance, this is really what causes the inflationary scenario. So, like, I think about it like this, right? If you take my little town right now, right? So I got like 10,000 people who live in Astoria, right? And you give everybody in Astoria $1,000, right? And to say, hey, you can do whatever you want with it. I guarantee you the bars would be loaded, right? The restaurants would be occupied, the bars and restaurants would be occupied. The fun traveling experiences that people do for tourism around here would be definitely filled up, right? All that stuff would be experienced. And all the items that, and if it was, you know, continuous, if you had this $1,000 coming in, all those items that people are having fun and buying like that would start to move up in price. Now, something that wouldn't go up in price is toilet paper, right?
Mhm.
That $1,000 would not be moving into toilet paper. You would buy just as much toilet paper this month as you would next month or the month after that, even if you had $1,000. Right.
Correct.
So the added consumption going into toilet paper would not be created by all this expansion of new money coming into my area. But the restaurants, bars, and all that other stuff would experience that. Why? Because of the added consumption that has taken place within those particular items. And so
Mhm.
this is how I see inflation, right? This
Okay.
is one of the reasons why I was able to call out lumber when it was peaking out at 1,700 per thousand, saying this is going to go back down to its normal price when the supply chain becomes reestablished within lumber. Totally happened, right?
Yep.
Bang, right back down to a normal price because I knew the consumption that was taking place at the time was going to go back down to a normal consumption, meeting the supply that was being produced. In fact, lumber mills could oversupply if they choose to. They actually curtail development when they have inventory
Mhm.
increases. So they're very well aware of the market and the availability of lumber that has taken place out there. In fact, we have, I mean, just to kind of go off on a little bit here. Right now, up in British Columbia, during a time in which that you would think that there would be lumber increasing, right? Because here we're going into summer, better weather. This is when, you know, the time to frame. They're actually shutting down mills up in British Columbia. Can't afford just permanently
Wow.
shut down another mill up there, right? And we're finding that taking place here in Oregon as well. Just a few months ago, they announced a bunch of mills shutting down here. So
Hmm.
it's not to the point that I am so like, whoa, man, we need to, you know, ring some alarm bells about this. Like, I'm not there yet because shutting down mills and curtailing development, especially during times of like wildfires and stuff like that, is not uncommon, right? So, like, to
Mm.
hear about it doesn't shock me, doesn't like, make me like, oh no, what's going on here? To me, this is a very typical thing that is happening. However, the reasonings that these mills are given are more into the idea that the regulations of logging and environmental practices are now limiting the amount of logs that can get to the mill, making it more expensive for them. And so
Got it.
therefore they don't want to produce when the lumber prices are as low as they are. Right. And
Makes
so
sense.
all makes sense, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
totally
That
makes
makes
sense.
Yeah, very logical. I know something you and I talked about, it might have been a year ago, possibly even 18 months ago, was you maybe creating a buy box or possibly looking at buying an investment property. I don't know if that moved anywhere, if that still something on your horizon or not.
Um, Mike, I I don't want to make up a bunch of excuses, but no, I did not, you know. And what it really comes down to is I don't like my area. I don't
Okay.
want to invest in my area. And I'm nervous about buying a property that I'm not near
Right.
because I'm not that nimble to get away from, like, say, my day job or something like that. And so having a property that is close to me, I it would make me feel more comfortable about investing into something like
Sure.
that. And I don't like my area for investing because I just find it's too expensive and not really like
The return's not there.
well, it's not. I mean, I'd imagine that somebody could probably figure it out if they knew what they were doing. But for my first one, I like, and not knowing what I'm doing, I want to do something that's going to be a lot more. I mean, I'd have more confidence in, you know.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
gotcha.
with that being the case, I'm more focused in on trying to establish something more in like working on myself and getting something like a course going or writing a book or doing more of these speaking engagements and trying to progress into something like that as opposed to maybe doing like a day job like you
Got it.
know to try and then once I get that kind of going, then I think I would be a lot more comfortable about saying maybe having a property that is not near me because then I could travel to it with a lot
Yeah.
more ease,
Well,
you know.
just to have some fun with this, one of the options
Yeah.
you might have is to turn the house you're currently living into a rental, and then you buy something else. That's always something that's possible as well.
Yeah, and you know, I actually considered that because my neighbor popped up the other day talking about how he might be leaving, and I'm like, oh man, and he's got a bunch of acreage right next to the property, you know, and so I'm like, well, that might actually work out. Then I could rent this one and buy that one, and
There you go.
have, like, you know, all this property right next to each other, and you know, but
Yeah.
that was something that was a wheel that spun, but it didn't seem like he was too interested in like talking numbers or anything, so I didn't want to
Ah,
push it.
no, I got you. I got you. That's very, very cool. Well, you know what? As we kind of wrap this up, appreciate your hour. What are your kind of what does anything keep Simon up at night? Is like anything in the economy or anything make you particularly nervous about what's going on, or what do you think?
Um, no, I don't really get nervous about anything.
Okay.
You know, I try not to live in any kind of fear. If there's something that's, you know, scaring me or, you know, that has me very nervous or got my anxiety ripping, then I guess I meditate on it and figure it out and, you know, and, you know, and try and get like, you know, my head clear on it. Living in fear doesn't give you the ability to make good decisions. Yeah. And so I don't get scared about the information that I have. I just look at it as you know, for what it is. You know, if it's heavy information, I just kind of look at it and say, okay, what do I need to do to benefit my life with this information? And that's really how I see it. Um, I mean, to me, if you are aware of the situation and you know you have positions outside of like the problem, like you know you got this banking situation, financial, government, if you're sitting on a bunch of silver or something like that or gold or property or something that maybe is just like kind of outside of that, then your concern level of it is pretty low. But if you have a lot invested into that, you know, where it's like, you know, your whole life can change based on these government decisions or something, then I can see where that could be a very big problem for you. So again, like, you know, is there anything that really concerns me? Not really. But what does kind of have me like questioning is what is it that the Federal Reserve is really going for when it comes to this 2% inflation? Like, that is
Mm,
probably my biggest question out of all the research that I have ever done. To hear the Federal Reserve say that they are going for a 2% average inflation rate over time, and we have no mathematical formula for
yeah,
figuring out this 2% average inflation rate over time, and it will be considered a flexible average inflation rate. And like to
yeah,
me, I'm like,
yeah. This hurts my head.
what is it that you're going for again here? Because I don't understand. Because everybody out here in the mainstream media and everybody else seems to think it's a 2% target, but it's obviously not.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
not what it
it's like
says. Yeah, it's an
that's
average.
not what
Yeah,
they're saying. Yeah, right. And so that would be like probably one of the biggest things. Like if I had Jerome Powell sitting right in front of me, or if I had the FOMC and I had one question to ask, it would be that. It'd be like, okay, guys, listen, I understand that you got this 2% average inflation rate over time with no mathematical formula for figuring it out. So what is it that you guys are looking at
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Help me
says,
out.
okay, here's the 2%? Because it could be like, how far back do you have to look to find the 2%? Right?
Right.
Or what is it that is needing to be done to have a 2% inflation expectation going into the future? Like, what are you backward looking or forward looking here? Like, what's going on? So because they have that so obscured, right? And I've really, really looked for it. Like I've done some studies. I don't know exactly what it is that they're looking at. Right. I know that it's over time, and I know that they have like a backward looking way of looking at it and a forward way of looking at it. But how they are using that for their actual monetary policy, I think is very confusing. And I don't know what that
Yeah.
is. Right.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
pretty
think that's my
wild.
biggest question.
Yeah. Wild. Well, Simon, you are amazing. Thank you for saying yes to coming back to this. Congrats on Rebel Capitalist. I'm sure you're going to
Thank you.
crush it there as well.
Looking
If
forward.
somebody doesn't know where to find you, where do we send them?
I'm pretty much active on YouTube. So, really, if you want to send me an email, my emails have been really overwhelmed lately. So I'm trying to get through them. You know that, Mike. And I mean, I do apologize for not getting back even, to George. It was like 3 days later when I finally saw it. But you can always send me an email. Hopefully, I'll get back to it. I'm active on YouTube. If you really want to learn a lot more about this information, as far as like being able to communicate with me and have like, be able to ask questions of like my community that I put together. My members only is $1 a month. It's like literally insignificant. It doesn't cost much at all. And for $1 a month, I do one live stream a week, members only. We have 15 to 30, sometimes a little bit more people who join in on those live streams. And it's a very good, thorough discussion about whatever topic it is that we have. And if you really want to learn more about it, I think that's probably the place that you could go to. So
Simon, you're amazing, man. Be
thank you.
well. All right.
All right. I appreciate you, Mike, man.
Thank you. Later, brother.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.